another episode of the Square and Compass podcast. This will be released on Wednesday. So I think I'm going to release it as a Square and Compass Wednesday information video. But we're going to talk about, I was telling our guest, worshipful brother Michael Radigan, I first heard about the Amity app, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago when I had the Masonic Roundtable fellas on. And this is a mea culpa, I didn't actually get around to finding it, downloading it, becoming active on it until a few months ago. And I'm unhappy with myself that I waited as long as I did, but I'm happy that I'm part of it because it is a very, very useful app. And that's what we're here to talk about today, the Amity app, with one of its creators. The other one is coughing up a bit of a lung right now. He's sick, so we're giving him a chance to rest. Worshipful sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Cameron. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know Jeremy wishes he was here as well. He is battling some illness, but he'll be doing fine, and we'll get through it. So Amity has really taken on quite a journey. It's been an incredible blessing, a huge Masonic education for the both of us. Amity started really as a digital repository of where all the lodges are in the world. And that was, we realized that there was a need for this, that the old book, was a great tool, but it was missing some elements. And we really knew that new members of the craft, wanted to interface with some sort of technology like this. Since that time, we've taken on a number of different features within Amity, but what we realized after a while was the biggest thing that we are is not really the technology, not the features that we offer. It's really being a trust company. As we dawned on this new journey of technology in Masonry, there's people who had a lot of trepidation. Some people didn't use technology at all. One of the lines we always talk about is tell a grandparent, to FaceTime their grandkids. After that, they're hooked. But it takes something. It takes a need to want to use technology. So that really was the basis of what we've been, is traveling around the world, meeting the leadership of Grand Lodges, understanding what's distinct and sovereign in that area, right? Because that's the beauty of Freemasonry as well, is each area has its different perspective and different feel of Masonry, although we all have certain commonality above all. Just kind of making sure we're there to understand who's who. And through that, we've now expanded to doing Masonic identification for over 100 grand jurisdictions, making it far more easier. There really had been no innovations in Masonic education, Masonic identification for really over 200 years. I mean, the only improvement had been creating a seal on a piece of paper. And nowadays, sometimes kids with Photoshop could make, a lot of our paper identification. So this is the new step, a new level of security for us throughout the world that we're excited to be involved in.
I mentioned at the start, your title, you're a past master, worshipful brother. Did the genesis for Amity, did it come from your time as a worshipful master, dealing with, thinking about identification for lodges, or where did the initial thought of Amity, from where did it come, and what was the genesis and the initial thinking behind developing this app?
No, that's a great question. Just to back up a little, no, when I first started, I was a junior deacon, I believe, at the time. Jeremy and I, who was the other co-founder of Amity, we have been good family friends well before we were brothers in the craft. We've known each other since we were about 3 years old. And we had kind of reunited, and he's the one who I had reached out to about Masonry. I had at my mother's house, I saw a picture of him and his family, and he was wearing a Masonic belt buckle. And I had already been inquiring about Masonry, and so I called him out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to him in years, and we really just hit it off again. And eventually, I became a member. He lived in D.C. I lived in New York, so obviously I couldn't go visit his lodge. And I became a member of a really old lodge in New York and just loved it, kind of dove in head first. So we had met again for Masonic Week down in DC. And Jeremy had been a past master of his lodge, Potomac 5 in DC, for many years. And he had been a secretary as well and had seen a lot of the issues involved in the work of a secretary and what it's like if you're in a lodge that has multiple international travelers or big events where people are coming in from everywhere. It's a lot to get all those names right, to get all the grand lodges right, the honorifics, of where they're coming from. And he realized that technology could help a lot in this way by checking into a meeting. And so that was sort of the vision that he had. I knew that there was a need throughout the world for people to be, connected more. But we had this protocol, right? We have a protocol that's been in there for 250 years of your secretary, you reach out to your secretary, they reach out to the grand secretary, over to the other grand secretary, to the other secretary, and then vice versa. And the truth is, by the time that's done, your trip is typically over if you didn't plan in advance, with months of planning. And the internet was circumventing all that. People were just reaching out on Facebook. And so Grand Lodges weren't getting the information or know who was coming to visit them. So we realized that there was a need here to better all angles of the craft for the members, for the leadership. And that's where this really all started from.
Now, the practical side of it, if someone, and I'll leave the links in the description to this video, but if a brother is interested in joining the Amity app, how does he go about it? What's required? And what are some of the things that upon, becoming part of the app that he will be able to do and will be able to use the app? How can it further his Masonic career? But I guess that's two questions. Let's start with the first one. How do you sign up and what do you need to sign up?
Sure. So in either case, you go to either app store and download the app. It's free. You'll go through the registration process. You put in an email. It'll ask you to verify that email to make sure you're working, have a working email account. Once you do that, you'll then, choose a grand jurisdiction, your lodge. Once all that is done and registration is finalized, you still have to be verified as a Mason in good standing because the app is free, and we want to make sure that we're keeping security serious, that we don't have people using the app who shouldn't be. So then we go through that process. Now, there's a lot of jurisdictions that have an automated process using an API, and we tie in directly to their member management system. Some of the jurisdictions don't have that. And then what they have are manual Grand Lodge administrators or lodge administrators. And they can verify the accounts of either the members of their lodge or their Grand Lodge. And then that gives full access to the app after registration once you've been verified. Once that's done, it's done once. Obviously, if somebody's suspended or whatnot, they can remove that access as well. And that's the beauty of real-time verification is, when somebody kind of goes around with a dues card, if something were to happen, they could technically take that dues card and go to another jurisdiction, and they wouldn't be the wiser, really, if they knew all the words, if they knew the tokens. They would be able to get into a lodge. But having a digital card, we're able to hit a button and immediately the next time they scan that card, you would see whatever the status is, if they were suspended or whatnot. So that's, a great feature for the app. Once you're in there, once you're verified, there's a number of different features. Now, being a lodge administrator, anybody from the junior warden up in most jurisdictions, it allows you to create digital meetings to check into. It allows you to verify the members of your lodge. It allows you to send messages to members of the lodge or your Grand Lodge that they can then reply back, within the application. We also have a section for Masonic Media Library, which has not all of them, but most of them, the Masonic podcasts and blogs throughout the world. So it's a central place that you don't have to scour the internet looking for all your favorite Masonic podcasts. We have the MSA Short Talk bulletins you could purchase for subscription within the app. And we're also bringing new features to the Near Me, which would also be similar to Masonic businesses or Masonic landmarks. We have all the most of the appendant bodies and all the lodges in the Near Me section of the map. But wouldn't it be great to know when you're traveling through a town that diner is owned by a Mason, or that this realtor is a Mason in town if you're looking for a realtor? Those are things that we think are really important to Masons in general, and we should have this type of technology similar to the rest of the world.
You talked about the technology side of it in terms like what you can do with it, right? So the digital meetings, providing information, allowing lodge administrators to provide information that can be found by other Masons. One of the questions, though, that is when it comes to digital anything, digital app, anything where you're inputting information, right, is going to relate to security. I know you talk about that on your flyer. Again, you can find the links in the description. When I had on Right with Brother Richard Kaufman to discuss the Grand Lodge, our Grand Lodge of Canada in the province of Ontario's new lodge management system, which has membership information on it, where we talked about security of that information. And again, for the Amity app, what type of security measures are in place for my information, for example, which is currently on the app? What type of security measures are taken to make sure that information stays safe, both in terms of the personal information that you're putting on, but also the lodge information and the meeting information that you're putting on?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's actually sort of, as I said, the technology is all the plumbing. And really what we are is a trust company. And we adhere to the highest standards of GDPR law, New York Shield, the California consumer private data laws. This is something that is very prevalent in the world now in regard to private data and how that's protected. And so that's actually something that we're kind of hopefully revolutionizing in a way, where most of the technology for Masons and the past, maybe decade or so, most of it is actually from a leadership perspective, right? It's a member management system that's helping them manage their Grand Lodge in an efficient way. But those are typically from the top down. And it actually, in some areas, it's making Grand Lodges liable in some areas, not understanding these private data laws, and that they are responsible for the data of their members. And especially in these areas that have heightened laws regarding this. For instance, you might be from a jurisdiction that says, well, we don't really ever have to deal with that, right? We're in maybe the heart of the United States, and we don't have that many international travelers. But the interesting thing about the laws are, if you have one member that maybe is a member of your jurisdiction but lives in New York or California, sometimes you can be susceptible to these laws, and we're not aware of that as much as we possibly should be. So that's something that's really important to us. Obviously, working with 125 different countries now, we have Masons in. We have to be aware of those laws. We have to be aware of the processes that they use, and be familiar. And for instance, we have to keep our servers in Europe, because that's something that would be demanded of European Grand Lodges when it comes to security. So these are things that we're constantly trying to think of, and again, be that grease between the wheels for many of the technologies throughout Freemasonry.
Today, we were before we came online, we were talking offline and going through the app. One of the really interesting features that you have that I wanted to discuss, I'm just pulling it up now to make sure I got it right, is your Lodge of the Day feature, which I think is really, really cool. And if I recall correctly, as I'm pulling it up, today's Lodge of the Day is Eureka Lodge. Yes, Eureka Lodge number 16, Grand Lodge of California. So everybody, even if you're not on the Amity app, check out that lodge. It's the Lodge of the Day, and then get on the Amity app. I was wondering, for the Lodge of the Day, is that something that, is the Lodge of the Day being decided by Amity, where you're selecting the lodge, or are lodges contacting you because maybe they have something going on or an anniversary or something special and asking to be Lodge of the Day, or is it a combination thereof? And if there is a lodge that has something special happening, how can it become, the Lodge of tomorrow or something to that effect?
Yeah, so that's a great question too, and I think it's a little bit of both. Clearly, when we first started, we wanted to promote more, and we would ask friends of ours and whatnot when we first started. Now we do get a great deal of communication and people who do want to put their lodges on. The whole idea was really started actually during COVID. And the idea was to be able to travel, to be able to, everyone was locked up, and we were, dying to practice Freemasonry. And this is a great way to be able to go see a lodge, to learn about their artifacts, to learn about maybe some of the history of the lodge while you're sitting at home. It's really just a Masonic education tool. And so we would love to share more about different lodges in different jurisdictions. So we always ask people to reach out to us, send us, a brief write-up of the history of the lodge, some images. We do ask that no images of living persons be in the pictures, just for security purposes. We do have places in the world where it's not looked upon well to be a Mason. So we just want to make sure we protect our members, and any of the internal or external pictures of the lodge or artifacts, we'd be happy to share as a new Lodge of the Day.
And this is less and less, though obviously it still exists. What is your response, either on a personal level as a brother, or as the Amity co-founder, right, to those brothers that could be Grand Lodge members, Grand Lodge officers, down to lodge members, who have concerns about Freemasonry in the digital space, whether it be an app or, there was, which I personally don't understand it. I was a big proponent of it, but even during the COVID lockdowns, there was pushback against any type of virtual meetings amongst some brothers. First, have you, again, either on a personal level or at the Amity level, experienced any pushback? And also, what is your response to those brothers who are wary of Freemasonry within the digital sphere, digital space?
So I think this is another great conversation, and I will posit it as this is my personal opinion, and not the opinion necessarily of Amity or any Grand Lodge. My lodge is a very old traditional lodge, and we're from before 1760, and I during COVID, during all of that, we had the opportunity in our Grand Lodge to do virtual meetings, which I think are great for fellowship. There are other Grand Lodges that actually, went forward and made it that they could do an opening and closing on Zoom. And that's their prerogative. I mean, that's the beauty of Freemasonry, is each area gets to choose what they want to do and how they want to do it. And that's the beauty of what the craft is. I actually would never want to see us to trade the experience of being in a lodge and doing ritual for doing it virtually. However, there might be a technology one day where not just like virtual, but you could maybe smell or you could feel. I know we do have that technology. It's just not readily available for every consumer.
But is that, sorry to jump in, that's an interesting point that you bring up. The assumption, um, the assumption amongst some that one is at the exclusion of the other, right? So when you had, for example, the virtual meetings going on, a brethren pushing back saying, you can't replace in-person meetings. It's like, well, at the moment, in our jurisdiction, they kind of developed through COVID. So at the time, it's like, well, there's no such thing as an in-person meeting at the moment. But the idea that, you have to pick one or the other, as opposed to relying on both for different purposes. I mean, every jurisdiction is differently. My personal opinion is, I'm not a fan of seeing ritual in a virtual space, but I am a fan of it as a way to, strengthen fellowship and kind of social connections, especially for those brothers who may be a member of your lodge, but as you touched on earlier, you can be, a member of a lodge in Kansas but live in New York.
Absolutely.
And how do you get to an in-person meeting, but you can still take part in a virtual event?
And I think that's how it really helped us, particularly in my lodge. We have some members who do live out of state in Oklahoma, in different, parts of the country. And we have 2 table lodges a year that are really well put together, and they come in town for that. But this was an opportunity for them to talk and fellowship with the brothers where they get more time than that 15 minutes when they're at the one event or the 2 events a year. Right. So now they're getting to monthly or every 2 weeks talk to individuals that they might not otherwise have been able to speak to when they're actually there in person, because there's so many other individuals that they have to interact with. So I think there are absolutely positives, with that type of technology and fellowship. Certainly, my year as master, we implemented electronic dues payments, and this was so revolutionary and new for my lodge. But literally in a matter of a month, we had 50% of the dues paid. That had never happened before. So now everybody loves it. So there are these areas that I think we can really help the craft. I happen to be maybe a traditionalist, where I, particularly in my personal opinion, would not want to see that be in a virtual space for the ritual. Again, even if we had this technology where you could smell and you had all the senses and you could feel, and I got to be careful not to give away too many secrets, but we all know of a moment, right, when you're sort of brought to light. And would those, would you see the same thing? Would it mean the same thing to you virtually? Those are the things I don't know. And I got to be frank, I think we've been kind of revolutionary enough in the craft in presenting just Amity that wouldn't be my cross to bear, actually, at this point. So I'd like to see it more traditional, and the ritual be, in that room for just us. But again, there are ways that we can implement technology, certainly, to help. And I'm always willing to listen to other opinions and to keep an open mind.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is the discussion, the open mind. Because people will put the question, to me in very, in kind of in such broad ways that it's hard to answer. So, if they ask me, how do you feel about Freemasonry in the virtual space? It's like, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? If the problem is dues payment, then I 100% think in the virtual space is wonderful, because we have the same thing. We have virtual dues payment. It makes life so much easier. Or e-transfer type thing for dues payment. That makes life so much easier. And Amity is a great tool for Freemasons to use, for any Freemason to use, but especially from a lodge administration perspective. It's just another one of those tools that exist in the virtual space that is, in my opinion, only been on it for a short time, but you can see the benefits and you can see the ways that it can be of help to anybody in their Masonic career. So, instead to all those people who kind of discuss Freemasonry in the virtual space, the key is, okay, what particular issue is it that you're trying to solve? And then can the virtual space be of assistance? And I think, when it comes to dues payment, when it comes to socializing, and when it comes to recognition, those are three areas where the virtual space has a lot to offer. And Jeremy, Amity should be credited for taking steps to use the virtual space to solve one of those problems, particularly recognition.
Well, thank you, brother. I mean, it's something that we believe in. I think any student of Masonry will realize that Masonry has had many areas that have continued to change. Like take, for instance, one, the historical lectures. Like we didn't have historical lectures, until Thomas Smith Webb and some of these other people made them, right? So my lodge was working before these lectures were around before. That was an innovation to Freemasonry. Doing the tracing board on the floor in chalk in a pub, that was the original way to do it. And they'd wipe it away with a mop. And then eventually they made tracing boards to help with the historical lectures where they could roll them up and take them away. But if you had talked to Masons 300 years ago or 400 years ago, when they were putting chalk on the floor and came back in a time machine to show them, these tracing boards, they would be standing up in their graves right now, because to them, that was just not allowed. It's similar to ritual books. There's still jurisdictions out there where it is an abomination to use a ritual book. Where others, we have them, and we have them in a codex and whatnot. There's other jurisdictions that keep them in a safe, and you can only go to the lodge and go with a Masonic mentor, a past master, and take it out and work on it. So there's constant innovation. We talked earlier about the Masonic identification. The truth is, most of our physical identification today is probably less secure than 300 years ago, when we had these beautiful ornate certificates with wax seals and artwork on them, because that was somewhat difficult to duplicate, where now technology could duplicate almost any physical letter or card. The seal, that would take some work, but again, there's been innovation after innovation over time in our craft, and that's, I think, just something that we've been fortunate, to be involved in.
We were talking offline, and again, this is something I wanted to touch on, make sure people know, make sure brothers know before we finish. If if you sign up and you experience a difficulty with the app, in my case, one of my lodges is showing up on your end but not on my end, and those things are going to happen. Who can we get in touch with? How do we get in touch with people to let them know, to let the app know, we're not seeing this, or this isn't working well? Or how do we go about that? Or even if maybe we maybe, knock on wood, it has been known to happen, a new lodge gets itself chartered, gets itself started, and wants to be added onto the Amity app so it can be recognized. What's the content information? How do we go about doing those things?
Sure. Please, anytime, reach out to us at our support desk, which is support@copiri.com. and we will get the information there. We'll input or update any of the data, any of the you might see a slight bug. Please let us know. Let us know what platform you're using. Again, sometimes it's different technology, whether it's for Android and Google Play or the Apple App Store. It's just a different process in the apps and how they're created. So just reach out to us at the support desk. You can also reach out to us within the app or on the website. I know there was an issue at one point with one brother that it didn't go through, Mark. I don't know if he's listening, but hopefully that's corrected, and you could reach us at any place. Typically, we'll get back to you within a few days. With just a lot of brothers in 125 countries, sometimes it can take a little bit of time.
You say that. I mean, I can say for myself, you've always got back to me right away. So at least I've had no issues in terms of people getting in touch and keeping in touch with me. And you even get the ticket, which is a nice little thing from Copiri, right? When you send an email out, you get a ticket back right away saying your email has been received, which is a nice touch. I always appreciate that, because at least that it's been received. It's got the Google robots haven't intercepted it and it's gone off into the ether. So I always appreciate that.
That's actually one thing to since you bring it up. Some brothers do have difficulty when they first register with the app, because that automated email comes from Copiri. Sometimes it might go to your spam folder where it has that email validation code. So just check your spam folder and check also that you're looking for email from Copiri versus Amity. Sometimes that's a little bit confusing for brothers.
Give me flashbacks as being a secretary yelling at brothers, check your spam folder. Yes. Emails I send you might not get to your inbox all the time, or from Grand Lodge or whatever it is. Always, if you're a Mason, any Mason out there, check your spam folder. You'll probably find a summons from 1999 in there or something.
Yes. And with technology, always check that you have the most recent version installed. Sometimes usually the app will let you know that, but we have had a few instances where maybe it was 2 versions back where it didn't necessarily say, to update the app, and they're trying to reset their password and they'll get a login message, failed. But always check that you have the most recent version installed, and that should help out a lot.
I'm going to switch hats for a second, and this is not a Square Compass thing. This is personal, just Cameron Addison speaking, but as secretary of Harmony Lodge, I'm just going to take a moment to invite anybody out. We were speaking about virtual meetings. My lodge has a virtual meeting March 23rd, 2 p.m. With the I've said before, the best thing I think that my Grand Lodge of Canada in the province of Ontario, such a long name, that my Grand Lodge did was when they started the virtual meetings during the pandemic, they didn't allow ritual work, and they allowed the meetings to be not tiled. So our virtual meetings are open to the public. We've had actually guests join us in these meetings and then become applicants, and then become candidates, become brothers. They're a great way to have people come in who are just curious about the craft and want to learn more about it. It's another way to socialize with them. But anyways, we have a meeting March 23rd, 2 p.m., not tiled, and we have a guest speaker. It's going to be professional wrestling superstar and health and fitness coach Tony Nese. He's with right now he's with AEW. He was wrestling with NXT before, and he's going to talk about ways that brothers can maintain their health and their fitness. Because, not to give away any secrets, but in our jurisdiction, and I think every jurisdiction, right, one of the duties that you owe to Freemasonry is a duty to yourself to keep yourself well, mentally and physically. And as a former junior warden, and as someone who's attended many meetings where it's pizza, where it's fried food, where it's green beans, which is healthy, but maybe not when they're doused in butter and all the rest of it, keeping yourself healthy, I think, is an important thing. So March 23rd, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Get in touch with me. Get in touch with me through Square and Compass, but I'll respond as the secretary of my lodge. about how you can join and log on. So yeah, that's just a quick plug because I wanted to get that in there. But with that, worshipful brother, thank you for being on the podcast. Like I said, I feel guilty I didn't get onto the app sooner, but it is a wonderful app. And I think that it's just another example of, it's not enough in Freemasonry to recognize a problem. You have to also be able to think of and develop solutions, right? And it sounds like from we talked about, you recognized that there was challenges and there were problems with recognition, how to verify visitors, how to make sure they're properly, they have the recognition with your Grand Lodge. But then you also came up with a very elegant and a very, I think, user-friendly and a very secure solution. So I'm a big fan of it, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, brother. It's an honor, and it's been an incredible journey. And what I would share to all the brothers is just, never give in. If you believe in something, if you have a goal and a vision, just keep working towards it, because there were many people who supported us and helped us along the way, but there was also many people who said, this will never work, this will never happen. And fortunately, we stuck to it, and here we are. And so thank you very much for offering those kind words.